Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? Most of them are really stupid, so this guy isn't a criminal mastermind, but here goes. He wanted to rob a jeweler on our city's main street. So, he found out the flat beside the jeweler's was empty and he hid there. For 2 weeks he triggered the alarm on purpose several times a night. Massive headache for the police and the business. We turned up to see nothing there, nothing on cameras. Thought it was just a fluke, so the jewelers turned off the alarm system and said they'd wait until the morning to get a new one installed or that one rewired, because something wasn't right. As soon as he heard that and the police leaving, he tore down the wall, had already been working on this apparently, and robbed the place taking his sweet time. Escaped without anyone noticing anything for hours, until the jewelers came back in the morning. Then he tried to resell something he stole which had a serial number on it and got caught. So not that smart after all. Good effort though. Guy I went to high school with kept selling this gold necklace under a fake ID at jewelry stores. When he had cash in his hand from the sale, he flashed a real-looking airsoft gun and demanded the necklace back. Worked about twice until the third guy knew what the deal was if someone tried selling this one particular necklace. Shop owner went in the back to reference an appraisal book, and just called the cops. Funny part was he got like a year for the robberies, but using the fake gun added 5 years to the sentence. A friend of my brother moved to Israel where for a period of time it was acceptable to drive with an American driver's license. He was pulled over for speeding, and when asked for his license, gave the officer his Costco card. Costco is a membership-based retail warehouse in the US and a few other countries. The exchange apparently went something like this. Officer, Costco. What is Costco? Friend, it's the state I'm from. Officer, that sounds made up. Friend, there are lots of states you probably haven't heard of. Have you heard of Arkansas? How about Idaho? Officer, I guess not. Friend, well, I'm from the small state of Costco. The officer didn't have a response, and wound up writing the ticket to someone with a Costco driver's license. Friend framed the ticket and still has it hanging on his wall. Well, there was this one guy, we'll call him Jack. Now, Jack stole stuff, but also involved a lot of people. One time, he was planning to steal a whole bunch of cars, all luxury cars. So, what he did, was he got his people to call 911, etc., from all different places and countries, to tell them that car theft was taking place in multiple places. He also only used a few people each time, so it was different voices, people, locations, etc. So the police went each time, until he actually did the crime, then no one came. He was never caught. When the owner of those cars came, the police didn't believe him. My primary school got robbed of all their new computers when I was a kid. They were so proud of their new computer lab, and made a big celebration of it. This was in the dial-up days, when it was about to boom into the enormous industry it has become. The guys managed to jimmy a window enough to get a stick through, and wave it around in front of the motion sensors until they set the alarms off. Of course, being back to base alarms, the police would be notified straight away, and the thieves would close the window and hide away. So, when the cops arrived there would be no sign of forced entry, and nothing was missing. So, it looked like a fatly alarm. They continued this cycle until the cops got the shits and stopped responding. Then they were free to empty the place out, and no one found out until the computer lab teacher unlocked the door the next morning. I never found out if they got busted in the end or not, but I like to think they didn't. The story goes like this. A homeowner walks out one morning to drive to work, only to find his car missing. He reports the car stolen to police. A few days later, his car is sitting back in front of his house. When he gets inside, he finds a note. It was an apology that said the thief was in dire need of quick transportation, and so he borrowed the first car he found with the keys inside. The writer noticed the sticker on the car for the local sports team, and just so there were no hard feelings, he left 4 tickets to an upcoming game in the glove box for the homeowner and his family. So, the homeowner and his family attend the game, but when they return home, they find the house has been ransacked, and all items of value are gone. There's a small tourist town, where I grew up that is divided in half by a big river. The only way between the two sides is over a long bridge, unless you go all the way around another mountain pass. These guys called in, like, 2 to 3 bomb threats to a posh hotel on one side of the bridge. I think they even left some dummy packages. All the police went across the bridge to do crowd control, etc. The guys then called in a bomb threat on the bridge and started robbing stuff on the other side. The police couldn't be positive the bomb threat was real or not and hesitated long enough to give the thieves a head start. I first heard this story about 10 years ago in Banff, Alberta. Never bothered to look up what was real versus what is invented. I think this is pretty close. But as my father used to say, you can't let truth get in the way of a good story. Here's one. I knew this guy back in the early 80s, let's call him Jim. Well, he really wanted this high-powered superbike, but he knew he couldn't ever afford it, so what he did was to take drive to London and scout it about for a few days until he found that particular model parked outside a house. He goes back that night with a slide hammer, pulls the lock, and steals the bike. He gets it home, puts it in his garage and completely strips it, so that the only thing left is the frame and the bottom half of the engine, which he drags into the weeds at the bottom of his garden. Then he pours fuel over it and burns it a bit. A few weeks pass and weeds have started growing over it. It's at that point he calls the cops and reports that someone had dumped a bike frame in his garden. The cops show up and he explains that he just got back from being away and found it. The cops take the frame and note down his name and address. A few days later, the cops call him and say that the bike had been stolen from London a month or so ago, from the serial number on the bottom half of the engine and frame, and that the insurance company had classed the bike as a write-off and had told the cops to dispose of it. Now, because the frame was found in his garden and the insurance company didn't want it, the cops were duty-bound to ask him if he wanted to keep it or if they should throw it. So, he tells them that he'd always wanted to build a bike. He gets the frame back from them, repaints it, then puts it all back together, and re-registers it as a Keurig, stolen and recovered. I forgot to call him Jim, didn't I? Working in a home improvement store when younger. This guy came in, went to the snowblowers, took one and went to the return desk. Said he wanted to return it, but had no receipt. They told him you need a receipt, so he says okay I'll be back, and wheels it off to car through the front door. He did this a few times apparently. Couple places even helped him load it back into his car. Probably someone who committed a crime I never solved. With that being said, I had a guy use a sledgehammer to smash his way through a wall at a Best Buy and steal a bunch of phones and cameras. He was smart enough to wear gloves and a face mask and not touch anything he didn't have to. Alarms didn't go off until he exited out the back door, which the alarm company gets after a minute or two and takes them like 3/4 minutes to call into us, giving him a good 5-minute head start, so he was probably a few miles away before we got dispatched to it. He clearly scoped out the area before doing his deed too. Smart dude. This was in the late 90s early. A guy in my dorm came to school solely to deal drugs. He took out student loans, registered for a bunch of 300-person freshman survey courses, where he would never be missed, then literally never went to class. All he did was go to raves and concerts and keggers and sell party drugs. After the first semester, he was suspended. He wrote the usual I was young and dumb, and in over my head sob story, and got put on probation for a semester. So, he had a repeat of the full. At the end of the year, he was kicked out, and didn't care. He made something on the order of $150K, in return for about $8K in student loans, to cover a year of housing and tuition. So far as I know, he was never caught. It may have been a short-sighted maneuver in the long run, but in the short run it seemed fairly genius, to effectively use federal loans, to start your drug business. Obligatory not a cop, but close on 20 years ago now a guy on Australia's Gold Coast got away with a bank robbery in broad daylight. He chased the bank for a while, and discovered a pattern of the bank manager arriving about 30 minutes before anyone else each morning, where he would leave the front doors unlocked so staff could help themselves in without a key, or needing to wait for the boss to come and let them in. One morning the crook dressed himself up for a busy day of office work, and waited for the bank manager to arrive. As the manager was unlocking the doors, he made his move, entering the building and threatening the manager with a gun. He got all the details he'd need to access the vault, and so forth, and then tied the manager up, and stuffed him in his office. When the staff arrived, he told them that the manager had called in sick, and that regional office had sent him in to do the open shop thing, and no one batted an eyelid. This bank had a small walk-in vault that normally only held about 30 to 50k on any given day, but old mate had timed his robbery for the morning after business banking day, when all the local small businesses would make their end-of-week deposits, and reportedly got a score of close to 250k. Once the vault was open, he pulled his gun out and invited all the staff to enter the vault and lock them in. By this stage the bank was due to be open, so when he went to leave there were a number of customers waiting to get inside to do their banking. He told them all that there had been an issue with the computers, and that the tech team had estimated it would take about 30 minutes before the issue would be resolved, and that they couldn't open until then. Then he got into his car and drove straight to the airport and flew to Hong Kong and then disappeared. To my knowledge, the cops never caught him and never managed to find the money. They knew he'd have had to leave most of it in Australia somewhere, because you can only take 10k odd in cash and any currency out of the country before customs pulls you into their interview rooms. So the assumption was that he had to have an accomplice here who would funnel the money to him slowly over time. My friend Alan had a warrant for a traffic offense. One day he received a phone call from his friend Ben. Ben told Alan, "Remember that traffic warrant you have? You don't need to worry about it anymore. I took care of it." Ben wants on to explain that he had been arrested for a minor offense and received community service for his sentence. The community service job he received was filing at the municipal court. He came across Alan's warrant and destroyed it. A few months later, Alan was stopped for another traffic offense. The officer told Alan, "Computer shows a warrant for you. I'm placing you under arrest." While Alan sat in the back seat of the squad car, the dispatcher radioed the officer. "I was unable to get confirmation on that warrant and Alan was released." At least in those days, the police wouldn't arrest someone on a warrant unless a PT employee could lay his hands on an actual paper warrant and confirm it existed. I have a friend who is no longer a criminal, but committed crimes for about 15 years and never got arrested or even investigated. Some of his highlights: growing weed in a shed on his neighbor's property. The neighbor was old and never left the house. Buying a building under a fake name, taking out huge loans against it, getting HUD money, and burning it all down. Sold fake raffle tickets to raffle off stuff he never had and never raffled. I can't remember how many times he pulled that scam, but he bought a new car with the money. He moved a bunch of times because people would suspect him of being a con man. His dad was in jail for similar stuff, but he was never even questioned by the police about anything. Now he has a family and a normal job.